Without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Tom Whitmeyer, who's going to talk to us some about how NASA is driving innovation.
Okay, thank you, Parker. Can you hear me?
I sure can. Tom, if you'd like, I'd love to read your bio and let the people know a little bit about you before we get started. How's that sound?
Yeah, I'm going to do that. Why don't we start with that? First of all, I apologize. I don't have the background everybody else has today. What I do have in the background are two of the rockets I was responsible for. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. One's the shuttle and one's the Artemis missions. Let me tell you a little bit about my background. But before I do that, I want to tell you how impressed I was with, I actually did a little homework before today and watched the Collective Chronicles. And I was really impressed with the people that I saw and the background that you had and the areas that you're interested with. I really have a lot of passion for this stuff, and I was very impressed with all that. So congratulations, you guys are a great team. So looked at the speakers you're going to hear from a little bit later on. Kevin Murphy, Dr. Kushner, Dr. Chapman. These people are really incredible people. And in fact, everybody on the list is really going to be interesting for you to listen to today. And I was impressed with the Applied Remote Sensor Training Program, the Globe Observer Application Program. For me, this is exactly the kind of things that's important. And I'll tell you why, because I'm going to talk just a few minutes about my background. I'm retired NASA. I had about 40 years with the agency. The first half of that was as a contractor supporting NASA. The second half of that was actually working as a civil servant, mostly in senior executive positions. And right now I work for a company called Booz Allen. And that's kind of relevant for today because Booz Allen is a big data company. And so some of the background that I'll be sharing with you today and the things we'll be talking about really have a lot to do with data and technology and innovation. And so I actually get to spend a lot of time with folks that do that for a living. But as far as my background, what I only wanted to really highlight was about the mid-90s to the end of the 90s, 1990s. I actually worked at the Goddard Space Flight Center, and I was a quality engineer, and I worked on two spacecraft. One was called EOS-AM, which is Earth Observing Spacecraft AM. It would later be called Terra once it was launched. And the second one was EOS-PM, and it would become called Aqua after it was launched. Terra was launched in 1999 off the West Coast on an Atlas II, and it was built by Lockheed. And Aqua was built by TRW, and it was launched in 2002. So they've been up there about 20, 22, 24 years altogether. My job, I wasn't an important person. I was just helping out with a lot of our people on the program. And I actually had a chance to see the MODIS spacecraft instrument. And so a lot of the data we'll talk about today actually comes from MODIS. It's been sitting up there about 22 years collecting data. And so it's kind of cool to have a career where you actually get to see the instrument before it launches and then see what it does in terms of helping out with data and science. And the other experience I had during my career was when I was working Aqua, we actually went down to Brazil. And I had an opportunity to meet and go to the Brazilian Space Agency, and I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but NP. And they actually worked on an instrument that was on Aqua. It's called HSB, and the B stands for Brazil. And my job was to work with a few of our people and make sure that we could actually get it from Brazil out to TRW on the West Coast. And to me, that was just an incredible experience. I have these 4 decades of doing really cool stuff. And the things that I think you'll see as you get into your career, the things that really stick with you may not be the things you think are going to be the things that stick with you. I loved having an opportunity to go to Brazil. It was a beautiful country and meet some of the folks that were just absolutely outstanding, go to their space agency and talk about doing the Earth observation. And I'll never forget that. I mean, that was something I did very early in my career, and it really meant a lot to me. And so while my contributions to Aqua probably weren't that great, I've always looked at the spacecrafts and the data that comes off the spacecraft, and I've really enjoyed having that opportunity. And so when I listened to everybody, Parker, go through the list of people here today, let me tell you, I've spent a good part of my career working in the international community. I'll be in Austria, in Sydney in October. There's an international astronautic conference out there. And so it's just really amazing to see everybody who's here today. Let me go to the next slide. And later on, if we have more time, Parker can ask me some more questions. I'll talk about going to the moon and stuff. But that was the thing I wanted to talk to start with. Okay, so we're going to talk about data innovation and community action. And this is probably not what you're expecting for a keynote speech, because I'm actually going to talk about data and technology. Dr. Karen St. Germain, who's really an innovative person at NASA, has a pyramid. And on the pyramid, it has to do with the Earth Science Action Strategy from 2024 to 2034. And it's a pyramid. And on the top of the pyramid are kind of the people that you want to interact with in communities throughout the country. At the bottom of the pyramid, it talks about technology, and it's really kind of the underlying theme for what I'll talk about today. And what I found in my career was that a lot of people don't have a lot of experience with the data technology part of the equation. They know what kind of science they need to do. They know what instruments they need to fly. They may, they're great researcher and scientist, but it's really the technology part it's a challenge to a lot of people. And it's the technology part that's changed so much over the years. So we're going to talk a little technology today. Let me go to the next chart. And so let's talk about today's problem. Back in the late 1990s, I was at Goddard and we flew Aqua and Terra. These are really expensive spacecraft. They take a while to build and they cost hundreds of millions of dollars. And the launches on a Delta and Atlas, $100 million as well. They were a great spacecraft. They've lived 20 plus years on orbit, and they provided an incredible science. NASA has a history, so does ESA, and so do other countries, including India, in flying these type of spacecraft and these instruments, and they've been collecting a lot of really just amazing data. Petabytes of data. In fact, I don't know if we don't really even have the ability to completely analyze the data that comes down from the spacecrafts and share it with people. We take selective snapshots with some of the applications that you all put together, and we look at the data. What I can tell you, though, everything has changed since back when I helped work on Aqua and Terra. Is there a lot more spacecraft up there right now? I mean, the intelligence community, the DoD, everybody is, and due to the decreased cost of launching things in space, there are a constellation of Earth-observing spacecraft out there. And so as I talk a little bit today, I'm going to actually give you three things to think about. The first thing is there's a place called TerraWatch Space. In a TerraWatch Space, they talk about all the different type of Earth-observing spacecraft we have today. And they talk about companies like Capella, Maxar, Spire, Albedo, Planet Earth, Umbria. And it provides information about how these companies work, what kind of data they collect, and how they share that data with other folks. And it's very interesting. If you haven't had a chance to look at TerraWatch Space, I'm sure many of you have, it gives a really great discussion about who's collecting data outside of just government entities and for what purposes, for agricultural, industry, other types of activities. So that would be the first thing I would want to highlight. The second thing is, of course, we have data that we've collected. MODIS, the spacecraft instrument that I worked on, was combined with Sentinel-2 and Landsat-7 data, and they put it into a foundational database. And a lot of what you'll see nowadays comes from that foundational database. And so the amount of data is no longer about getting data or building spacecraft. It's literally how do you get the data? What's the technology to get the data to people in the best possible way? Let me go to the next chart. Well, that's completely, back in my day, we were mostly worried about getting the data. This side. Okay, we got to back up one. We went one slide too many. We're backing up. We're backing up. We're backing up. One more. So that's today's data. Probably go to the next chart. So this is one of the potential solutions. There actually was a chart that was done before this. And in the chart that was before this chart, it talked about how a lot of the data that we get today, it goes directly from a spacecraft to an application to the end user. And that's called basically a common data mode. What's available nowadays is probably a more sophisticated approach. And if you go to a open study that ESA did based on a series of lectures they did in 2018, and they published a report in 2019. That's the report right there. You can go look it up. And it talks about blockchain technology. And the thing about blockchain technology is that it gives you the ability to take data from multiple different sources and share that data in a combined way. And you can keep track of things. So we're going to talk about blockchain technology a little bit today and why that's important. So let me go to the next chart and we can get to that. This is a chart that kind of talks about what's happening at the agency level. Now I'm retired and you're going to hear from some agency officials that will do a much better job of talking today's activities. I can tell you after doing this for 40 years, what I have learned, in just a second. What I can tell you for right now is we have a gentleman called Jared Isaacman that's showing up. He's the nominee to be the NASA administrator. And during the nomination process, what happens is, I've been through 8 of them, is before you're confirmed, you're really not allowed to talk a lot about what you're going to do when you show up. And so Jared is in the wings. He's talking to NASA people. He's learning more about the agency as a whole, but he really hasn't talked too much about what his plans are. And so I want to talk about that for a few minutes because I think this might be important for you folks as you move forward. The first picture in the middle there with Jared, and that's actually at the New York Stock Exchange. Jared, when he was 20 years ago, when he was 16 and a half years old, he went to his parents' basement and he started a company called, which would eventually be called, it would use blockchain technology to do Shift 4. It does basically money transactions. And he grew that company from nothing. He had a $10,000 investment. And at this point, it's one of the predominant sources. So if you go to a football game or if you go to a taco stand or something like that, you're probably using Shift 4 technology, particularly in the United States, to accept your credit card. When I go to the car rental store, the National Car Rental, they actually use Shift 4. And so that's the first thing Jared did. When he was doing this about 20 years ago, when I was off trying to build Aqua and Terra, he also decided he wanted to do planes. So in the left-hand corner, that is a plane that he flies in formation at air shows, and he does this for charity. He has a number of records for flying across the country and around the world. He is actually quite an enthusiast for this. He actually has a MiG-29 that's from Russia, that he actually is the only certified Russian fighter aircraft in the United States that he flies around. And he actually runs a company that does adversarial warfare. He has the largest fleet of adversarial aircraft. Those are aircraft from other countries. And the Air Force actually trains against them. He did that as an entrepreneur. That's incredible, right? In the left-hand corner, he decided what he really wanted to do was go into space. This is all in the course of 20 years, by the way. So he did a thing called Inspiration 4 a couple of years ago. Inspiration 4 was an opportunity to take people and put them on the space station and bring them back. It was completely commercial. Jared didn't do anything with NASA. He contracted to have the flight in space and the flight to come back. And so, and his thought was that there should be universal access to space. So Jared basically had 2 people on the mission who had no background at all in space come join him in space. And that was just this incredible opportunity for people to participate in space. He feels very strongly about this, that space shouldn't just be for a handful of people. And he does this because he thinks it's important. He uses his own money, hundreds of millions of dollars. And in the right-hand corner is what we call Polaris Dawn. And so if you haven't been following the space agency, you're probably not familiar with this. Polaris Dawn was another completely commercial flight on the Dragon, a SpaceX Dragon. He went out past the Van Allen belts, which hadn't been done since the Apollo program with humans. He then came back in. He opened up, depressurized the cabin, opened the hatch, and went out and looked at Earth, which is what the picture you're looking at, on a spacesuit that he helped pay for. And so this is just this incredible person, right? I mean, to me, I look at this and I think of all the things I've done over the last 40 years. None of this compares to this. We've never had an administrator who cared about technology or people, about everybody having access to space and the importance of space for everybody on the ground. So I think outside of the first thing, if you get a chance, take a look at Terra Watch Space. The second thing I'd really encourage you to do is read about Jared Isaacman, because he is going to be the new administrator. We'll get confirmed in a couple more weeks. And everything that you do as part of this Space Apps Collective Genius Summit, he would have an opinion on, right? I mean, this is a guy that really understands technology. He understands blockchain technology. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. And he really cares about people. So I just wanted to spend a few minutes on that because it's going to make more sense as I keep going forward. Let me go to the next chart. So this is blockchain technology. Jared didn't invent it. It was been invented a little bit beforehand in Japan, but he's actually one of the first people to use it on a commercial basis. He's very familiar with the technology. And it uses what they call a decentralized application and a distributed ledger. And so that sounds pretty interesting. But what that means is that you have the ability to verify data provenance. If you read the ESA report, NASA had a report that was similar to it, looking at blockchain technology. Everybody points out to the fact that if you're going to use data to help impact people's life on a day-to-day basis, you really want to know where the data came from. Is it the right data? Is it we have the right scientific research? Has it been calibrated? Has it been confirmed? And so that's the data provenance, and it could be from a commercial source, one of these multiple companies now that are available, or it could be from ESA, it could be from NASA, it could be from multiple sources. You want to have the trust in the data, and then trust in the data is how you get the data, how you receive the data, and how you use the data. You want to be able to share the data, and having a decentralized application like a blockchain technology means that if you're in a local community, you're probably interested in 4 or 5 different parts of the data. You're interested in predictive data that might come from a NASA spacecraft like Aqua Terra that's been going around the Earth for 20 years and has seasonal data concerning the way that the Earth responds to certain type of events. You're probably interested in some of these commercial data that has spot coverage of a specific location, and they can tell you nearly instantaneously what's going on in my community. You're probably interested in any kind of UAV or data that might come from a local source, and then you probably have some stuff on the ground that verifies what you're seeing. That's what we call multi-platform data analysis. And it's extremely difficult to do right now. Your applications, most applications, which are incredibly powerful, usually look at a single data source and provide information based on that. To do a multi-platform application where you combine data from multiple different sources and make it available 24/7 based on what people are interested in, that's an incredible tool. If you could do that, you would revolutionize how we do Earth science. And I've talked a lot about Earth science. This also applies to space domain awareness, other types of activities where you have multiple people doing similar things. And so the last thing is the monetization of the opportunities. When NASA and back when I was working for NASA, we did some data buys with commercial imagery. And it was very difficult because you got into licensing restrictions. If you go to Capella, Maxar, Aspire, Albedo, Planet Earth, and you take an image, they pretty much want to know what you're going to do with the image. If the image is for research, then they're okay with that. But if the image is going to eventually be shared to a broader community that could be in benefit from that image, they want to be able to keep track of that. And we're talking pennies per image here. It's not very expensive data. The ability to use blockchain technology gives you the opportunity to keep track of where the image goes, who's using the image, and for what purpose the image is being used. Once again, if we're going to impact lives across the world and communities everywhere, it really requires a much broader scaling of the information, the ability to do multiple domain information, and have it ingestible so people can use their iPhone just like they do with the weather today and really figure out what's important to where I'm at right now. If it's been an unusually dry season and there's a storm coming, I probably want to turn off the power lines or I'm going to have a fire, right? Those are the type of scalable applications that if you had an approach where you could keep track of the data, you had the trust in the data, you could share the data, and you had a monitorized way to scale the data, it would be a breakthrough in how we use data. Let me go to the next chart. This is, if you went to the ESA study, that please go and Google that study when you get a chance, the report from 2019. They actually have this Gartner chart, and it's from the year 2018, which is when they worked on the charts. This is the Gartner report from 2024. And many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with this type of report. Basically, it talks about the state of the application. If you look it up and you look at blockchain technology and distributed applications, which is what they're talking about, it's much further along than it was in 2018. In fact, it's at the cusp of being a pretty much well-utilized technology. Now, Jared Isaacman, the person who's about to become the NOAA administrator, has been working with this technology for over 20 years. And so, and he acquires companies, and he actually does it in Europe as well. So he's very familiar with this technology, and everything I just talked about, I think he would probably say it differently, but he would probably have the same thoughts. And it's, believe me, it's much farther along now than it was 4 years ago. Let me go to the next chart. So on the chart, they talk about the slope of enlightenment and the plateau of productivity, right? This is no simple thing to do. The ESA study and a few studies that we've done with NASA and other locations, and you can Google these studies and take a look yourself. Blockchain technology is very difficult to implement. You need to have data standards, and data standards can be different whether you're in Europe or the United States or Canada or Brazil. And so being able to rely on data standards is an important consideration. It requires an infrastructure to go along with it. And really, the standards and the infrastructure don't necessarily have to be done by NASA. In fact, Isaacman would probably say that it's an entrepreneurial type activity. And it really needs to result in community action. Okay, I have this great capability. It can get data from multiple different sources. It helps answer information that's digestible to me. And so I need to be able to implement it that way. And I'm not here today to tell you that there is any one simple answer or that there is some kind of ownership and part of the agency. I seriously doubt anybody who from the agency comes to talk to you next will promote this, because I don't necessarily believe that that's the right answer. In fact, when I talked to Parker about talking today, what I told him was I was hoping you all would take a look at this and you would think about this. And you would think about some of these technological questions about how do we distribute data and what's the best way to coordinate the data. I am convinced that it would require some degree of coordination and agreement amongst multiple different entities to work. I'm convinced the administrator who's about to be confirmed here in a couple of weeks is probably one of the most knowledgeable persons that I'll ever get to talk to about the technology. But I certainly don't have the answer today. And I think that that's one of the things we want to leave you with. Go look at TerraWatch Space, read the ESA report, and think about this chart here. How would you actually do it? And there's actually some really great questions in the ESA report along those lines. Let me go to the next chart. There's a couple of attempts to do this. The Europeans are very interested in it because in Europe, they have to rely a lot on different currencies, different cultures, different people. And so they really think about these decentralized applications, probably more than we do in the United States. And South America, South Africa. I mean, I think there's probably an area where we may not be the right people to think about this because, quite frankly, other countries and other cultures haven't given this a lot more thought. The only two I could find where they actually use blockchain technology, you use them for cryptocurrency, by the way, and other types of activities, is Euroguard, which is a European effort where they kind of got started. I don't think they did much with it. And 3IPK. Once again, I think it's kind of a aspirational thing, but not a lot of progress has been made. And it's not because these aren't capable people. These are highly capable people. It's just a really hard problem. So let me go to the last chart. So this is the conclusions and call to action. First of all, I apologize for not giving you an inspirational introduction today and actually just giving you a couple of hard problems to think about. But when I read the collective chronicles, I figured if I was going to ask anything of you, it should be something like this. You know, you have the same aspirations I have. I've done this type of thing. I've launched spacecraft into space. I care about people. I think this is really important work. And based on the work that you do in the software area, you're probably a lot more familiar with this than I am. The challenge in the EO day-to-day is no longer collecting the data. We're still going to need European and NASA and all the space agencies to launch spacecraft because they're often targeted to very specific information. They're calibrated. But there's also this other data that's also available that could be brought to bear as part of that process. The blockchain approach is one approach. It's quite frankly, I think it's a pretty good one. I don't think you would do it for everything. I don't think you would take the foundational database that they're working on right now and convert it to this. I think you need to do the things that we're doing today, the things folks will talk to you about later today and tomorrow. But I think this could also help with this. And I think it's important for NASA and this community, I should have not just in NASA, but this community to think about it. We have a unique window of opportunity. My 40 years working for the agency, I've never worked for an administrator that had this type of technical background or this type of passion on a problem that quite frankly could have the biggest change that we've ever seen in how this data is used to help people out on a day-to-day basis throughout the world. I mean, it's just this unique window of opportunity that I just don't see. And I don't see Jared Isaacman showing up and say, well, it's okay that everybody has their own data systems or we don't really distribute it well. I think he likes challenges like that. You know, he might not say that NASA should be the answer to all this thing, and I don't think it should be either, but he certainly would have an opinion and he would have some thoughts on that. So to prepare for that, as we wait for the nomination, I was hoping, Parker was hoping that maybe you all could think about that a little bit too. And so that's my presentation today. I'm sorry, it's like I said, usually at NASA, I've been through thousands of these, and normally we get an astronaut, they talk about going into space. I didn't make it easy for you today. I picked a topic that I think you could actually have an opinion on. And I'm personally generally interested in your opinion. I talked to a lot of folks. I worked at the agency a long time. I know a lot of people in the agency. You're going to have some folks that you'll be hearing from here today that are really influential people. And I think your opinions on this particular topic would be kind of, if you're familiar with the technology and you have any thoughts about what we talked about today, I think your opinions would really be value added. Parker, that's all I had.
I want to echo something that Jeffrey Martin said in the chat here. I think you might underestimate just how inspirational that talk was. We're talking about cutting edge technologies. We're talking about the future of data maintenance, the future of this agency. I think a lot of people, like myself, listen to that talk and feel I'm ready to hit the ground running personally. So thank you, Tom, for joining us this morning. Thank you for sharing your perspective on this technology, your rich history with the agency. We're so grateful that you were able to join us today. Tom, I want to start with some Q&A here in just a second. But as I do, my wheels are turning. I'm thinking about all the new and exciting ways people might use blockchain technology, this digital ledger technology. I wonder if some of our folks on the call might as well. In the chat, drop some ideas. How might the future of this technology shape up? What are some applications, some new uses of blockchain that might be pertinent to your work, our collective community, or some goals that you have as you look towards the future of science? So I'll be looking for some great examples to come through the chat there. Now, Tom, you covered a long history of this technology and a long history of yourself. And I think I want to learn a little bit more about you, actually. So I would love if you can think back over your illustrious career and share some of the moments that you're most proud of.
Yeah, and I'll try to, yeah, I've got the two things I'm most proud of are sitting behind me here. I worked on the Space Shuttle program. I was a deputy at NASA headquarters from the Columbia accident until we flew out the Space Shuttle. And that was really cool. I got to tell you, that was my favorite launch vehicle, actually. So I got to go to all the launches and meet all the astronauts. And, you know, at headquarters, we had a very specific role. We weren't making day-to-day decisions on which bolt to turn or stuff like that. But we actually had to keep the program headed in a good direction all the way through the closeout of the program and do it safely. And we're very proud of that. Everybody who was involved is proud of that. And we flew it out safely. And it was just an outstanding vehicle. If you never had a chance to visit a space shuttle, they're all in museums now. We distributed them out. It's a beautiful vehicle. The other one that's sitting back there, of course, is the SLS, and that's the Artemis 1 mission. I actually have I'm in the house today. I'm usually at work, but I have all types of things that flew around the moon, right? So how many people get to say that? We actually flew a bunch of stuff during the mission, and we got to go to the moon and back. And so it was pretty cool. I enjoyed that. What I tell people is this: you got to follow your passion. My dad was a plumber. And when I was a little boy, I would go sort through fittings at his plumbing shop. And it came from a small town. There's no expectation. I went to school, got a degree and stuff like that. But it's really kind of a wonderful period of time. And I would have really actually give anything to be actually young again and be looking forward to the next 40 years of work, because you're all about to hit what I can only describe to you as this just threshold in time where you're going to have a big launch vehicles. You got basically New Glenn, you've got Starship launching later today at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. Turn on your TV, you get to see another Starship launch. That's crazy stuff. I mean, it's absolutely outstanding. So that's a little bit about my background, but I could tell you that my background would have really been great. I'm really looking forward to the next 40 years. I hope we do. By the way, I'm a Mars person. Moon's pretty cool, but I'm really kind of I'm with you, Parker. I'm more of a Mars person, and I'm pretty sure they're going to send a couple starships to Mars. So wow. the other thing, and then I'll stop, is data. I mean, I never thought I'd say that. 40 years launching vehicles and stuff like that. I think the people here that are really into software development, coding, data, that's the key to the whole thing. It's not about going into space because a handful of people get to do it. There's about 100 astronauts. It's really to have an impact on the ground and help people out and learn things about medical devices and living within a radiation environment. I mean, anything that we learn, I think really benefits everybody else. And so my whole career, I was really more proud of the fact that I had a chance to work for NASA and that NASA did a lot of this stuff. And now I'm really excited that I think data and big launch vehicles are really gonna speed things up. So I think that's gonna be cool.
Yeah. I'm excited for that as well. A lot of changes in space and earth science since you entered the field.
Yeah, it's gonna be crazy. It's absolutely crazy. It's just crazy. I can't even. This is gonna be really cool. I got a lot of data, right? And we're gonna get a lot more stuff in space. I sometimes think we're gonna have a couple hundred people in space. I think he's right. You get to. I'm in Washington D.C. I'm right across from the Capital One Arena right now. Go to the Air and Space and take a look at Skylab. Skylab was put up in about 2 years. And they bolted bicycles to the wall. I mean, it was crazy. They didn't have to worry about saving weight or exotic materials. They just took the second stage of the Saturn V and stuck it up there, right? Well, Starship can do that, right? I mean, you put up so it's coming, right? There'll be a point you're all going to look back. I'll look back and say, I can't believe we were at the threshold of really this next generation of space exploration. And the data stuff, I don't know if blockchain's the right answer. It could be, but I think it really could get this stuff to people on a day-to-day basis. When my wife works for NOAA, she just retired, and I tell her I think my world, NOAA is almost a gold standard. The weather is a gold standard that you can go anywhere in the world and get a weather report on your iPhone, and that's really what we want to do with the ever data that we're collecting and make it universally available.
Yeah, I love that idea that space data like weather.com, you could visit nasa.com and have up to date to the second to the minute data about our atmosphere, our planet, our sun. I love that idea.
Yeah, NASA, ESA. I'm going to throw everybody in. Everybody here today, and I'd love to. I'm going to Spain and Turkey later in the year. So, and everybody here today is part of that. I don't even like to try to think of it as a NASA only thing.
I want to pivot a little bit. You mentioned folks who are growing up in today's day and age. I'm wondering if you had any recommendations for what skills young scientists in training should build to be ready for the future of work in space industries.
Yeah, well, I'm a big believer in data analytics right now. It used to be they would tell people get an engineering degree, go work at a center. That's kind of what my career was, and do stuff. And over a period of time, you'll have opportunities. And I ended up running, a big program at the end, right? And so that was pretty cool. I think there will be a lot more opportunities in the future. We talked to Eisenman, this universal access to space, which I think he's not just a Mars guy. He's like everybody should have access to space kind of guy. I think everybody here today doing the type of work that you're doing today gives you an opportunity. Every country that's represented here today will become a more active space participant. And it won't just be NASA, it'll be every country that they went through. And there'll be more people going into space. And so I think you're all in the right spot, right? Wherever you're at, that's the right spot. India has an incredible space program, by the way. The key is how do you do it, and don't just focus on getting into space, which was most of my career, big launch vehicles getting into space. What do you do in space, and how do you get that information back to people? So, Barker, to answer your question, I mean, this is it, right? Space apps, collective geniuses. There can be more stuff going on in space. People will live in space. And how can you actually bring it to people to make a change on the ground? I think that's going to be really incredible. But everybody's going to have it's going to be not just a handful of people or one or two agencies or anything like that. It's going to be a universally possible thing. And anything involving space as far as a career, once again, you don't have to actually build launch vehicles or anything like that. That's actually going to be the future. There's going to be just a nutso opening up of activities in space.
Well, okay, let's stay on that idea then. Can you named a few, but I'm curious if there's any other scientific advancements that you're really excited about for the next, say, decade that we'll be able to get access to.
Yeah, they had what they call multi-point data mesh. Which I think, for example, for the agency, I don't know of these real. I'm retired, so I can see things probably other people can't say. We'll get out. We'll do a lot more services type stuff. Data transport is an example. The ability to get data from a spacecraft to a spacecraft to ground has been revolutionized in the last 3 to 4 years, right? And so you can do laser comm communication and bounce data back and forth, get it to multiple ground stations. So that's something that's exploded. The Earth observation stuff we've talked about, space domain awareness. There's whole categories of space-related topics that I think will become big. On the scientific frontier, I think you're going to see a lot more opportunities at both ends of the spectrum. Big stuff going into space because now we have big launch vehicles, right? Tonight at 5:30, you'll see a launch vehicle is going to lift 100 metric tons into orbit. James Webb Telescope, it was being developed when I was at Goddard. I mean, we had to fold it up like a little origami thing, right? You don't have to do that when you have a big launch vehicle like that. And if it's low cost launch, you just get it up there as fast as you can, right? I think you're going to see that from a scientific perspective. Then you also will see more of the swarm technology, multiple launch spacecraft using different, combined with kind of the government access, combined with the commercial assets to do what we call multi-domain analysis. There'll be much more cross-cutting. I think it'll be much more cross-cutting in the future. It won't be like a NASA spacecraft collects data, they stick it on a server, or they stick it in the cloud. We do an application, you got to go find the application, you do it. I think it will become prevalent in our society in the future. It'll be just like all the science fiction movies you watch right now, where you're running around and all of a sudden you got some great knowledge of what's going on in space that moment, or if there's a methane gas leak in your neighborhood, or if there's a pollution issue. I mean, all this stuff will become, I believe, in the next 5 to 10 years, will become prevalent, and we'll never figure out how we ever lived before. When Isaacman worked on his blockchain technology, that was, if you wanted to do a credit card transaction, it took a long time. I mean, people forget this. I mean, if you're younger, it's like, what? It's like, no, really. Credit card transactions took a long, Parker's died in ASL, so he's a little bit closer to this than I am. And nowadays it's almost nearly instantaneous. You can go anywhere in the world and use your credit card and it recognizes it. It does a transaction for you. That's crazy, right? Apply that to what we're doing. Just think about that for a second. What's that going to look like? We're at the cusp of being able to pull stuff like that off. Got lots of more stuff in space, better ability to do stuff, do useful things with things that are in space. That's just a killer combination as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, agreed. I'm excited about it as well. A couple more questions for you before we get you off the stage here. I'm thinking about this global audience we have, these geniuses we have from around the world. I'm wondering if you could share what steps those folks or folks outside the United States, outside of Europe, can take to expand opportunities for digital ledger technologies for themselves and their communities.
Yeah, I think that that's a great question. And unfortunately, it's going to take some leadership at a combined base. It's very difficult to do this stuff on your own, right? I mean, they've taken available data sources, they've created applications that help out with their communities. That's tremendous. And I don't want to in any way say, and I hope I didn't say anything today that didn't note that that was really a useful thing. This next level that we've talked about is more of a hybrid where you're starting to bring in other data and do the more sophisticated analysis. It's going to take leadership, I think, from a country level leadership. That's why I hope ISACMA will help out, because I think it's very difficult to take the next step on your own. And that's why if you read the articles and stuff, there's kind of gotten as far as we can with taking the data from the specific site and bringing it to the ground and really doing this multi-domain stuff. Now, if I'm going to, hopefully, I'll see if this all works out. I may be in late September, early October at the International Astronaut Conference in Sydney. It's going to be there this fall. Next year, it'll be in Turkey, which I think will be beautiful as well. And so that's a good example where people get together on an international basis and think about these problems. But I think every country is going to have opportunities and more opportunities to actually get actively involved in space. And so you don't have to say, well, how do I get a job with NASA? It's not as necessarily the right question anymore. And everybody will listen to the Canadians. I've listened to every country that kind of chimed in. I think, will have really important stuff going on. I would say do your homework, look at TerraWatch, look at the ESA report, go review ISACMA. I mean, really stay on top of this stuff and think about it. And, that's kind of a call to action. I would love if we got feedback along those lines, like, hey, maybe you ought to think about this. I don't underestimate how difficult this is to make these kind of changes. They're actually very difficult. But I think everybody here, if you show the enthusiasm you already show, or you wouldn't have been here today, and then you start thinking forward 5 years from now, what is it going to look like in 5 years? That's what I challenge you to do.
Mm.
Don't just think about where we're at today. Where do you think we're going to be 5 years from now? And that to me will put you ahead of what's going to happen.
I love that. I like to start to wrap us up by thinking about innovation. You talked about some of the ways technology is changing and some of the ways that the hard skills, the scientific skills, the technical skills that folks have need to stay up to date. You talked about data analytics, blockchain. I saw folks in the chat thinking about quantum computing and what's possible with quantum computing and AI. In addition to those hard skills, those technical skills, I'm curious, what are some of the soft skills that drive innovation?
I think that estimate's very big. Yeah, first of all, Billy, I actually believe in the on top of blockchain, quantum physics. We do actually I work with we do quantum physics. It's coming. It's like that. I could have spent a whole thing just talking about the quantum stuff. And AI, we're a big provider of AI. Lots of people, and AI will be ambiguous. People say, well, what about AI ethics? It's like, well, everything you do every day is now influenced by AI. So embrace AI. Don't be afraid of it and be on top of it. But the people skills are the most important, right? I mean, for information to be impactful, it has to be digestible. There's a whole thought process behind what's important to people that they can use on a day-to-day basis. And I think a lot of people skip that part. I mean, particularly researchers and scientists, it's very hard for them to switch gears. They go to conferences, they speak with other technical experts, and then they have to switch gears and say, well, what do really people in the public think about? I did a lot of press conferences for my missions as a headquarters guy. And I had to describe things that would really made sense to people listening to the press conference. I couldn't just wheel in there and say, well, blah, 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 da, da, da. And, really forced me to actually think, be enthusiastic and care about what I was doing, but to say it in a way that people can really relate to it. What are they going to do? So I agree with you. People tend to underestimate the importance of, I don't even call them soft skills, but they're the ones that bridge the data to the people that you're trying to change. Different cultures have different needs. Different communities have different needs. People having the data that people can't digest is really terrible. It just doesn't work. That's like a huge part of this. Applications that are easy to use. Once again, he's got this guy Eisman showing. I mean, that was the whole thing about Shift 4. It wasn't that he had a technology, right? He had something that you could go to any vendor, a vegetable vendor, and they could just stick it on their computer. You put your card down, and you get a payment. And they do a lot of business dynamics. That was probably the hardest part of what he did, was figuring out the people part. And so, yeah, if you think about it, I mean, that's actually lots of people have the same technological knowledge, but not many people are successful. And the ones that are successful figure out the people part. So if you're a people person, once again, there are going to be lots of opportunities in space. Don't lose track of the people part of the aspect, particularly with universal access to space. We did and I'll stop because I'm probably let me know when I hit my time. We did a journey mapping of a trip to Mars, right? The trip is a 6 months transit there, 6 months transit back, and about a month on the surface. You're spending a lot of time actually in transit, and you're not touching any buttons because, quite frankly, it's heading to Mars. Please don't touch the button, or we'll divert from Mars and go somewhere else. As you get farther and farther away from Earth, you start to break that tether of the daily interaction to data that you and I are used to at this point. Constantly knowing what the weather today is, how did the Capitals do in their hockey game last night, all these things. Yeah, they did one in overtime. And all these things that you and I, we take for granted, communicating with our friends and family, our colleagues, all these things. That's a big social experiment, right? And so if we're going to do things like Mars, it's really about the people. And what are they experiencing as they take this journey? And they call it we actually have a term for it. It's called like a data journey, or and they journey map it. They say, okay, you're about an hour delay time. You got to do edge computing, make sure people have access to the information if something bad happens. And we get into stuff like you have eyewear that will tell you what to do. If you're an average person on space, you're not going to memorize how to get to the exits or which exit to go to or anything like that. And so there's this whole kind of universal access to space, people in space. All the science, I find watching science fiction fascinating, not for the technical stuff, it's the people stuff I find interesting. And if you watch some of these shows, just pay attention to what the people are doing and how they're reacting in space. That's going to be a big area. I tell you, people don't really, there'll be a lot of technical things, and we're going to throw a bunch of stuff in space with big launch vehicles like the one that's going to take off at 5:30 this evening. What are people going to do? Right? And so the borderlands, I mean, watch these scientific things and really focus on the people aspect of what these folks, and figure out, okay, how do I fit in that? And so, I don't want to sound like too much of a futurist. If I'd said this 5-10 years ago, people would have said, they would have dropped off by now. It's like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, or he's overly enthusiastic. I'm a hardened 40-year career veteran of space stuff. I'm telling you, it's coming, and it's going to be amazing, and you all get to be part of it. You figure out what you're interested in, just do it. There'll be opportunities, I guarantee you. And don't just focus on the lots of people build launch vehicles. We don't need everybody building launch vehicles. We don't need everybody building HABs. We need people figuring out what people are going to do in space and how space can help people on the ground. And that's going to be a big area.
Yeah, I could not agree more. A bit of a futurist myself, Tom, and I agree that it's coming. If it's not already here, it's coming.
Yeah.
Just a quick note to your point, right? Thinking about what are the non-technical, I'm building a launch vehicle ways to be involved. Guillermo Avellino in the chat says they're a librarian. He said he's very interested to think about how to bridge the gap between technology and data management. Like these kind of information systems questions, making data accessible to people, communicating in plain English or in simple language. Technological advancements is all going to be necessary skills. That's why we need all of you, collective community, to stay informed, stay involved, and to keep pushing us forward.
Yeah, absolutely. The opportunities are going to be there. If you have a passion, go for it. Like I said, I grew up in a small town. My dad was a plumber. I really got into this stuff. But plumbing, there's a lot of plumbing in space launch vehicles. So that helped me out a little bit. But it's coming. I mean, it's absolutely coming. It's absolutely, positively, 100% coming. And you all are going to have a wonderful time. But think about the future and do everything that Parker just talked about. Right? What does this really mean? and you get involved in the stuff to go to if you can get to a conference, do things like we're doing here today. I mean, you're already on the right path if you're here today, right? I mean, I might not have to tell you that. And don't feel that wherever you're at, you won't have a chance to do this stuff. You're going to have a chance. It's going to be everywhere. It's going to be universal. It won't be just limited to a couple people in a few locations type of thing. And I think that's the coolest part. I talked about going to Brazil, right? I could have talked about anything. That was actually a really cool part of my getting started when I finally included to me that I was part of a bigger community. And, yeah, we do a lot of for Artemis. We had a service module from Europe, so I spent a lot of time in Bremen and other locations. And so you just begin to meet other people, and people have different cultures, and you really kind of get you out of your just doing stuff. And I really enjoyed that more than anything else. And that's what I think space will become, this collective common ground, and it's all in the futurist movies Parker, you and I watch, right? That it becomes this common ground where different cultures come together and they do things jointly, and I think that's beautiful, and I think that's where we're going to
go. I agree, Tom. I think everyone on this call agrees. That's why we're here. Folks, a big thank you to our keynote speaker, Tom Whitmeyer. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tom.
Enjoy yourself. Have a great conference. Thank you.
I'd love if everybody in the chat before Tom leaves, share your appreciation with emoji reactions, applause hands, messages in the chat. Let's let him know how much we appreciate him joining us today. And it's raining in, Tom. All right, we appreciate your humility, but it's obvious that you have a huge impact on all kinds of folks from around the world. Thank you again. As a collective community, I'd love for us to do a little bit of reflection. So we're going to use the chat to do what I call a chat swarm. So what's going to happen is this. I'm going to ask you a question, and then I want you to type your answer, but don't hit send yet. We'll do that all at once. So the question I want you to reflect on: what sparked your interest from today's keynote? Now, don't hit send yet. I'm going to give you about a minute to think and type before you hit send. So just wait. What sparked your interest? What topics and concepts, what thing you heard or learned sparked your interest? Take about another 30 seconds before we all hit send together. All right, I'm going to count down from 5, and we'll hit send. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, send. Oh, and they're rolling in. Blockchain, international collaboration, following your dreams, AI and data, considering what people will do in space once we get there. Amazing stuff. All the professions that will be needed for a successful mission to Mars. That's huge to think about, Christine. Amazing. Amazing. Folks, we're so grateful that you were able to join us for this keynote from Mr. Tom Whitmeyer. Thank you so much for your participation, for your obvious interest and commitment to learning and growing yourselves as space scientists. I want to offer a reminder of what's coming up later this afternoon. We return at 1/2 the hour, where we'll have a panel from 2:30 to 4 p.m. Eastern or 7:30 to 9 UTC, where we discuss empowering the public through open science. We're joined by some NASA subject matter experts, Mark Kushner, Kevin Murphy, Marile Robles. And you have the option to hang out here between now and then, but we do encourage folks to step away from your computers, move around, stretch, refresh yourself before we come all back together. As we go into the break, we want to invite folks to use the connection board, which has just been linked in the chat, which will be open throughout the summit. This is a tool for you to populate ideas, projects, resources, asks, and offers from the summit community. So please take a look and share some ideas on that document. This board will also inform our connection sessions taking place tomorrow. So the ideas that you share, the things that you're interested in learning more about, we'll make sure to use those to shape our conversation tomorrow. Lastly, as we prepare to go into break, you'll see a poll from WebEx appear on your screen on the right-hand side below the chat window. We'd love to get your feedback about this session. So please take a moment to complete this as you go into the break. Thank you so much. We'll be back at 30 past the hour for our afternoon session. Thanks all.